just saying it's hard to believe that time you're already.
Weren't you just here?
I know, it seems like it really does. So I hope everybody has a copy of the report, if you don't, there's an extra. And I promise I won't go through the big topics update, but the big on part of the book, unless we have questions. So I think you've all had a chance to look at this.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Maybe since you've had a chance to look at it ahead of time, maybe I should start with any questions that you have. Did you come up with any questions?
Right here. Auditor's report.
Everybody's ready to go home.
What's that?
Everyone's ready to go home.
Leslie, is there anything that in particular you want to
Well,
point
let
out,
me-
bring our attention to?
Well, let me, if there are no questions, then I'll just go right into a summary of the audit then. So if you can get out the executive summary, it should be the. And this first page goes through the different reports that we issue. Now let me just refresh for those who may not have heard me speak before that the purpose of our audit is to render an opinion on your financial statements. So we get the QuickBooks file from Sabrina, and that's basically what we're auditing. We're auditing the balance sheet, the revenues, expenses, etc. And because in order to do the audit, we need to gain an understanding of how things work at the school and your internal controls. And then if we find anything that we want to bring to your attention, we do that in the management letter, which I'll go over in a minute. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the purpose of the audit is. And we've given you an unmodified report on the financial statements. That means that we believe your financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Okay. And I say material respects in that we don't look at everything, or we'd be here a lot longer than what we are. And then we also have a letter that you have in your packet. I'm not asking you to turn to it. It's called Communication with Those Charged with Governance at the conclusion of the audit. And it discusses the bulleted items here. So accounting practices, if there were any accounting practices that we did not think had sufficient support, we would put that in here. If we had any difficulties, we would say that in the letter. We didn't have any difficulties. In fact, Sabrina is very wonderful at getting us everything that we need in a very timely manner. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements, we didn't have any issues with those. No audit adjustments that we needed to propose. There were some things that Sabrina gave to us, but things that we needed to correct that were in any way material. No disagreements with management. Management does give us a letter that makes certain representations to us. It's quite a lengthy letter. They're basically saying that they've given us everything we've asked for, that, to their knowledge, everything's fairly stated, no related parties, which there are a couple that we disclosed in the financial statements. Things of that nature. So just to let you know that management has given us that letter. And consultations with other accountants, this is what we call opinion shopping. So if you didn't like what our opinion was and you wanted to talk to somebody, another CPA in town, to see if you could give a different opinion, but there wasn't anything like that. Nor were there any other audit findings or issues that we need to bring to your attention. And then the last item on there is the report on compliance and internal control over financial reporting. And that is a letter that we do because we audit you under government auditing standards. So even though you're not a government, the state does require you to be audited under the government auditing standards. And all it really means is that we do a little bit more with internal controls and a little bit more with compliance when we're doing our walkthroughs and our testing. Now, we had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And what I mean by that, significant deficiency would be an internal control issue, or it could be a combination of internal control issues that could result in a misstatement of the financial statements that's significant. And material weakness will be something that's material. So So we didn't have anything like that. We did have a management letter with a couple of comments on it, and they had to do, and I won't ask you to turn to that necessarily, I'll just talk to it. We do walkthroughs of cash disbursements, and we always pick some travel expenses to look at in addition to the other ones. And 1 out of 3 of those did not have pre-approval of travel. So, and then one employee that we looked at, because we do a payroll test too, there was not a personnel action form. And that's really the only issues that we found. Like I said, we don't look at everything, but you know, we do have a tendency to pick the ones that seem to have problems. I don't know, it's just an auditor thing, I think, but but they were really the only 2 items that we need to bring to your attention. So I think you can feel pretty good about that, really. And things are working well. We did have, it wasn't a finding, we had a problem with quotes last year. This year we didn't have anything like that. There was one quote for laptops, or one purchase of laptops that needed a quote, and it was for a very specific type of product, and the vendor worked with the manufacturer to get a rate that was within the state contract price. So, you know, so we're just considering that resolved. Of course, we look at that. We'll look at that again next year. We look at it every year when we're doing our testing. So, any questions so far about what we do, or any of the testing that we do? Okay. And then on page 2 starts the analysis. It's a 4-year look back, and 2010 was the first year that you really had a school operating. Before that, it was in your startup phase. So there's not a whole lot here, really. If you're looking at the assets and other receivables are up, that's mainly, well, that is from your student tuition. And it is up from last year. It is just really one district in particular that's probably 2/3 of that. Equipment leasehold improvements, that's going down. That's because your depreciation expense is exceeding the acquisitions that you're making during the year. So until you do big capital projects or anything like that, that'll continue to happen. So accrued liabilities, there's payroll liabilities, not a whole lot of change. And then if you look down at the net asset section, you can see in unrestricted you have $857,000, but of that, almost $600,000 is your investment in your fixed assets. So they can't really spend that. It's not available to you to spend. And then you have $17,500 of temporarily restricted net assets. And what that is you've gotten some grants, and there's a whole lot of them. Little ones that you've gotten that you haven't spent the money yet. So that's why it's considered temporarily restricted. And then when you spend it, then it gets released and it's unrestricted. So that's the balance sheet you're seeing in the position. And then on page 3 shows your income statement. So you can see that the progression of starting in 2010 to 2013 of your enrollment revenue, and also the students with disabilities revenues is going up there quite a bit. New grants that you got this year, it was the first year that you did the school lunch, you participated in the school lunch program. So you'll see that federal and state revenue there. And then when you look down at food service income, which is a couple lines below that, you see that went down a little, but then you have to take into consideration the fact that you've got some federal and state money that's supporting that program. And then, as you would expect, expenses went up because your needs went up with your enrollment. And there really wasn't a whole lot unusual there. Contracted services had kind of a blip up, and that's because you had Dean of Students was a contracted position during the year. Everything else is pretty much, the same. So it left you with an increase in net assets of almost $62,000 for the year. Okay. Any questions? We'll go over to page kind of in the middle of that page, it shows you net cash provided by operating activities. So 116,000. And then you invested some of that money into equipment acquisitions, 28,000 worth. And then you also repaid all of your note payable that you had outstanding from last year. So that all went away, which left you an increase in cash of 63,000 for the year. So all in all, I think a very stable, productive year.
Does anybody have any questions for Leslie? Thank
Okay.
you once again.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and also thank you to Sabrina and doing the help us during the audit.
Thank you, Sabrina.
All right. So, we're gonna move on to item B under, new business. And this is, discussion. This is kind of a typical pattern that we'll discuss things for a meeting or two before we make, decisions on it. But this is bringing up the subject of some potential changes in our admissions policy. So I will turn this over to Tina.
So, at the suggestion of the authorizer, we're taking a look at our admissions policies and how to make sure that we are, taking a look at the impacts of our admissions policies on students and student achievement. So, in your packet, you'll see that there's, I'd like to first bring your attention to analysis of graduation rates for students enrolled for 2 or more years. We've had two cohorts, two graduating cohorts, of, one that was almost double the size of the first. But again, Sabrina working her wonders with an Excel spreadsheet, we've taken the data regarding graduation and have looked at it through the lens of graduation rates for students who are enrolling at the beginning of their high school career and persisting through graduation, or even students that are coming earlier in their high school career, versus those who might come later on, say, have any number of students that might come in 11th or 12th grade seeking enrollment. And so, if we take a minute to look at this, our overall cohort graduation rate with 66 members of the cohort, which again includes any student who has spent even one day at New Roots. If someone decides that they'd like to enroll, they come in, they do the paperwork, and then they elect, not to attend class, or not to persist after a week or two. Those students become part of our enrollment graduation cohort. That's not typical. There may be a few of those students in there, but we do have some students that have come in and spent less than a year that are in that cohort, as well as students who have were in our cohort for several years before electing to leave to get a GED or pursue some other option. So the number of students that were in the total graduation cohort that were enrolled for at least 2 years or more was only 73%. We had 44 graduates. Our overall graduation.
Can you tell us where you are as you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
2009.
So I'm looking at the 2009. Actually, I was looking at 2009, which is our last one. So 66 students in our last graduation cohort. 48 of those were enrolled for more than 2 years. Right, so a total of 73% of the graduation cohort had been enrolled for more than 2 years. 44 out of the 66 graduated, making an overall graduation rate of 67%. When we break that down and we look at the percentage of the graduates who had been enrolled for at least 2 years was 84%. So 84% of those who graduated were in our school for at least 2 years. So this is like
37 were,
This-
37 of the 48,
37 of
of the 60,
the 44,
of the 44.
because the 44 are the number of graduates. So, yeah, this is sliced and diced in a lot of different ways, but it's interesting from these different perspectives. So the vast majority of the students who graduated had been at the school for at least 2 years. The percentage of students enrolled for greater than 2 years who graduated was 77%. That's the next line down from the 84, it's like a darker gray, and it's in bold. So among the students who have been enrolled in the school for at least 2 years out of that graduation cohort, we see a graduation rate that is 10 percentage points higher than the overall cohort graduation rate. Now, when you take out the special education students, we had 10 students who receive special education services. They're designated as SPED, and that's a lighter line. There are 10 of them. 8 of those students graduated in 4 years, giving us a graduation rate of 80% for that particular group of students. It's a really, really small sample size, and so it's difficult to sort of draw conclusions on that, but that's what the rate was for that year. Among students who received free or reduced price lunch that were enrolled for more than 2 years, there were 13 of those students, and 9 of them graduated in 4 years, so that's a rate of 69%. So not good, but
Small.
better than the overall cohort graduation rate. What's really interesting, like when you look at the number of students who were enrolled for 4 years, there were 26 of them, that's 59% of the overall cohort. Now I'm toward the bottom in the light rows. 24 of them graduated for a total of 92% of the students that were, came at the beginning and were there for the span of their education. So breaking this down in this way, and again, this was at the suggestion of the authorizer, to really take a careful look at our admissions policies, and we've really had a very open door admissions policy. Any time of the year we seek to support students who are interested in enrolling in exploring this option. But looking at the data, it's clear that the students that are the most successful are the students who have at least a good solid 2 years here at Woodlands. And so one of the questions that we can explore as we think about our admissions policy going forward is, do we think about timing of when we're admitting students into our grades? It's standard practice. Like for instance, LACS has several points during the year when students can come in. They don't have an open enrollment. So what you have here in the packet is the admissions policy that was in our original charter with just some additional language to think about. And this issue is mostly reflected in sort of my first stab at a draft. It ends up being the second paragraph here, which is underlined because of the track changes, so that's in my board packet.
trying to.
Right.
Right.
So students who first started high school 2 or more school years prior to their projected start date includes,
It's a handful.
right,
Tina, is there any reason to have that piece of the sentence there? Why do we need that, other than just wishing to enroll in 11 and 12?
well, because sometimes students who are, I mean, that's a good question. Sometimes students who were, how many years they've been in school doesn't correlate to what grade that they're seeking admission to, right, depending on the credit accumulation. And our experience, we need to have a good solid, 2 years in order to be able to. But actually, I think that the sentence is sort of backwards of somehow of what.
It may
I was
Yeah,
thinking-
those who wish to enroll in grades 11 and 12 should be the start of it. And it should go on from there.
Right.
Well,
Or
I
students
think we need to be
eligible.
really help us all think through who you actually want and who you don't want. And let me put it sort of in the terms I've been thinking about. There's an honored tradition in northeastern private schools at least, that when you admit a boy in the high school years, you put him back a year. Apparently common sense and wisdom over time has proved that boys mature slowly and that they're well served to simply move back a year and graduate maybe instead of, they graduate at 18, if they progress through normally, they would be graduating at 19. If that is part of the goal here, I'm not sure, because I've only seen the words for these few seconds, whether that serves your purpose. But maybe that is part of what you want, is young people who are willing, if they are progressing slowly, to be willing to become, they thought they were 11th graders or they want to be juniors, if they want to be willing to start at 10th grade, so to speak, and spend 3 years here, you may want them, and maybe that's what this is aimed at in part. The other thing that struck me was that it may be that the students and the school are well served with 11th graders who come in with enough credits so they're likely through normal progression to graduate, quote, on time. In other words, after just 2 years. I don't know if this language captures that or not. The last thing I would say was this wishing to enroll in grades 11 and 12. There's something to that in the sense that families and young people grasp on to a notion of when I'm an acceptable person in the community. If I've spent 2 years in high school, I should be a junior. And so, but that doesn't necessarily comport with their progress through the credit regimen. And my experience has been that people who are fixated on I'm a junior, but by the way, I only have passed 2 courses in the last 2 years before, that's going to present a problem for them and for a school. And so those are the ones I think you're trying to be careful of. So again, I don't have the language, I haven't thought through the language or not, but I know those are some of the practical problems of working with young people and their families, and particularly those who are fixated on, I'm a junior. I don't like high school. I won't be there for very long.
But the other thing is too, sometimes people move in January, they might be good students wherever they come from,
Right.
California to Florida. And there ought to be some way for them to be admitted if they can prove that they passed more than 2 courses and had a decent background.
If they're ready to step in at that.
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
Right.
Or but
They don't
yeah,
have
that might be if they're willing to, but that's a whole problem to deal with.
I think that.
But if they were honor students somewhere else, it would be hard to ask them to step back a year, if they came in January.
Right.
So,
If they're honor students, they probably don't present that problem. They present a different problem, which is, I wanna be in 11th grade, you said only September, but here I am with a full bank of credits and I'm a serious student.
Right,
You
right.
probably want that person.
So, right, so that, and it's not that we don't want the other one, it's just that what we're learning is that in the other situation, those students just are not successfully graduating, right? That's the problem, we're not getting them to that goal.
So
If we're admitting them at that point, and yet, in terms of our admissions policy, I guess that's it, I mean, this is a question for the attorney, and I think the answer is that, we can't create a policy that allows for a student in one category and not another to enter a year. I
I don't
believe,
know if that's true, you just have one way or
Is
the
it,
other.
do we assess where they should be when they apply?
when they enroll, we get a full transcript and, all the reports from the school that they were last at, so we see their full history. We do the Terra Nova assessment, so we get a sense of their, reading and math skill levels. We look at what courses that they had been enrolled in and how they were doing, so we look at the available information about their educational history to place in the courses. And the transcript tells how many credits they've accumulated, so that gives us a sense of, should we consider them a sophomore or a junior? And Joe's absolutely right that, families and students actually in particular get a very fixed sense of what they think that they should be.
Maybe the admission policy should be numeric as to the number of credits they need to have in order to be admitted in a particular class at a particular time. So if you enter in January for second semester of junior year, you must have, 16 credits, but you may enter as a mid-year sophomore if you have 8 or 10 credits. Maybe if you use an objective credit number as opposed to grade or
yeah.
age to dictate what class you can go into, then anybody who's looking at the school, they could be 19 and a half years old and want to be a senior, but they only have 14 credits, so they have to be a mid-year sophomore. And then it's not based on anything except for an objective number. You're not picking on anybody.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea.
To some extent, at the college.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the difference though is at the college level, if you feel somebody's not going to be successful for whatever reason, you don't admit them.
You don't admit it.
Well, and I think that just
Speaking on a numerical.
right, but I think this is kind of the issue that we're facing is that demonstrably, many of the students that are coming in mid-year as juniors or seniors aren't being successful. So we need to figure out, do we want to do anything about that? In some sense, it's not fair to them if we know, just statistically, that they're probably not gonna make it, or else not. So,
If that's really what the data shows, I'm unclear again, simply out of being unfamiliar with the data and the history, whether you're talking about social seniors and social juniors, who are coming in presenting themselves, I'm a senior, or you're actually talking about the number of credits they've earned. If it's, depending on what it is, your point may be exactly right. Maybe students who come in even though they've got 16 credits and present themselves as if they need 20 or whatever it is, if they present themselves as a senior and they still are unsuccessful, then it's probably not wise to admit him. On the other hand, if it really is a matter of credits, then that might be something different. I don't know if we know that yet.
Yeah, and there's some, I wish I had it right here, but we started also to look at how, the students who come in, at a time other than the start of the school year also are much more likely to be students that end up leaving early. So there's a kind of, part of the student population that is just more highly transient, and it may be that they're moving out of town. We've had some students, move out of state and then back in, within the same school year, and then ultimately, just leave for good. But the students who come in, just in broad strokes, the students who come in after the start of the school year, tend to be ones that don't persist to graduation too. And, our goal is to get those students in sooner so that we can, have the greater success rate with them and moving them towards graduation, right? Because I think that to some extent, there's some families are feeling like, New Roots is a safety net, like if it doesn't work out in our district high school, then the student will go to New Roots. And what we're finding is that, we may be able to be successful with them if we get them to come soon enough, but they'd be in a much better place statistically if they just started with us, right? So that we weren't trying to catch them up, and we could work with them right from the beginning and build that solid foundation. So,
Yeah, so there's really some hardship for them when they come mid-year, because they have to catch up to where they are and things like that.
right.
Yeah.
And they might feel like they're saying social junior, but they may be coming in with credit deficiencies where they're not only sort of coming in and needing to get up to speed for the school year, but then also if they're a junior planning to, thinking they're gonna be a senior the next year, they may have Regents exams that they didn't pass at the end of the previous year that they have to do in addition to the regular junior level coursework. So it just, when they get to that junior year, it becomes, things come to a head for some of these students, and it's not an ideal time for them to be making a transition in their high school.
You mentioned ACS, and is it your understanding that there are specific times of the year that beyond September when students can and cannot go to ACS?
I think it's the end of January, and I need to verify that, but I think it's at the beginning of each semester, so two times during the year. But I'd have to verify that.
But not mid-semester anyway.
Right. We do see an upswing in inquiries at the end of, as you might expect around in the fall marking period. Students get some feedback about how things are going, and families are assessing. We will see, greater inquiries. But again, it's, if a student is already struggling, it's hard to make a change in the middle of the year. And maybe there may be really positive elements to that, but they've missed, some chunk of the foundation, in each course, and just overall in terms of becoming acclimated to the school culture. They've missed the activities that we would be in a year to orient students to one another and to the school, and so that can lead to some sort of further drag on the system for them.
They're taking year-long courses by and large, or entirely
Yes.
year-long courses.
Right, so that's another important factor. And because our courses, like for instance, we have the Earth System Science in years 1 and 2, they're not, although our students take the biology regions at the end of their sophomore year, having had biology integrated into 2 years, students who come in the middle of Earth System Science 2 will getting a curriculum necessarily that complements their first half of the year in biology, if that's what they took, or if they took earth science, then they, they're probably really out of sync. They may end up doing some earth science as well as some biology, but it's not keeping them on track to pass either of those Regents exams, and they do need one science, right? So there's some ways in which, because of the very curriculum that we are chartered to demonstrate, it's not an easy transfer.
Exactly.
In some classes, like, we have in terms of math classes, students can generally enter into a math class that is essentially the same, although, the structure of it may be different in terms of what topics are being covered when, so that's a little easier. Language arts is.
So what's been done with kids who come in the middle of these 2-year sequences? Do they not take that course, or do they take it and try and catch up? And I guess I have to ask, how many 2-year sequence courses are there?
Well, there are really only two 2-year sequence courses. One is global studies, which is not dissimilar to how it's taught in other high schools. And then there's the earth system science.
Which is different than
Which is
what's
very
normally
different, so that's what's.
typically taught in high schools.
Right, that's right. And actually, our entire science curriculum is really off the beaten path compared to other high schools. So we have contemporary science, 1 and 2 at the 11th and 12th grade levels, which is an integration of physics and chemistry applied to sustainability-oriented projects. And so, all of which is, goes back to Jason's good thinking about, how do we design a science curriculum for sustainability that, builds over 4 years. And it takes an integrated approach to teaching what is traditionally taught as discrete subject areas. So, so science is really the area where we encounter more challenges, and particularly in the early grades, because they do have to get 1 science Regents. And so we've had some students who've entered we've sometimes, looked at their coursework and have assessed, maybe they're coming in as a sophomore, but we think that the Earth System Science 1 course for the remainder of the year better complements their what they've done so far that year, and will allow them to prepare for the exam. So we have to do a few wonky things like that.
So if those who are in a high school already, they have the option to stay there, and so we have no real responsibility to be sure that they get a high school education, right? I mean, what I'm saying is, if they're already in Ithaca High School and they want to come here, the fact that we don't admit them, they just stay in Ithaca High School. So there's not really a loss to them per se. They're in school and they can do whatever.
That's a good question.
But those who come from out of state are not the same thing, because they need to have a place for school.
accepting anybody into 11th and 12th grade,
Right.
period. Because the idea was that the curriculum was different enough that students just couldn't be successful. And we relaxed that. I'm not convinced that wasn't a good idea in the first place. So, you know, if we think that the curriculum is different enough, or that students who are coming in later aren't being successful, then we'd just basically be going back to what we had originally planned, which is that it's just different. It's not a safety net for some other place because the curriculum is not the same.
It would, I don't know, again, pardon my ignorance, but I don't know how many unsuccessful kids we're talking about and whether we know why they were unsuccessful. Was it transiency? Or was it in fact that they ran afoul of the curriculum?
That's a good point.
There's probably, undoubtedly, there's a balance to be struck. There are kids out there certainly who would love to be a part of this curriculum, and their parents would like them to be part of this curriculum. And we wouldn't want to exclude them either. So
I wish that Kate was here, because Kate's student actually entered, so would be in the category of student who would not enter under this policy, right? And so that's where because he didn't start at the very beginning of the school year, he came in, you know, toward the middle of the spring, I think it was. So could then have been, you know, enter in the fall, but, you know, it gives me pause because, you know, again, sometimes it takes a while for the growth of those students to be measurable in terms of our accountability plan goals, but for a student to go from not attending at all at their district high school and not even having graduation on the horizon to getting to a place where now, in this case of this particular young man, he did some college visits, you know, recently, and, you know, went down to New York City and visited a few colleges, and he's thinking and talking in that regard, and, you know, planning to graduate and, you know, moving in the right direction. And again, not all the data points are in order yet, but that's, although some might refer to that as anecdotal, it's about somebody's life. You know, it's somebody's life.
Right.
So,
I get that, but I'm still gonna repeat what I said, which is we're here
I was just thinking that.
to ensure the sustainability of the institution. That's why we're here. And
Because there is, you know, small though it may be, but too many individual cases who don't end up graduating or whatever, will drag the school down too. And then all the ones who are doing well, they'll have no school.
that's right. Well, I think it's really clear, especially when you break it down like this. I mean, we can see the impact of the open door admissions policy over these first 4 years on the data that we present every year. And it's been really fascinating to sort of dig deeper into that. And
I think the other thing we should consider is the impact the open door policies had on perceptions of the school and the community. And the notion that it might be a kind of safety net school may in fact discourage certain families from sending kids here who would do really well. So if we tighten up the ship and work with the students we know will be successful, then we'll be able to change those perceptions
predicated on the current admissions policy? Some charters, some places have to take anybody who comes, where they run a lottery, and they can't pick, once the lottery is run, you can't say, oh, but not you. So
Correct.
I don't, is
Correct.
this policy, the prior policy, something that's in the charter?
Yes, this is from the charter. And so, yes, we can't discriminate, in admissions on any basis, but we can regulate, when we have students enter, that's the place where, and that isn't something that we, as an organization, or certainly that I was aware, that was even a possibility. And, again, philosophically, wanting to, be a school that would provide an opportunity for students who, might be successful here and had struggled in other places, that sort of the two hand in hand are what led to our admissions practices over the last 4 years. But I absolutely agree in terms of thinking about the organizational sustainability from the perspective certainly of the data that we're presenting that gives a picture of our students' performance and how it's sort of clouded by because of the impacts of the admission policy, but also because in terms of just internally it's challenging to be orienting new students throughout the school year, to have new students coming in and trying to teachers helping them to catch up and needing to provide additional support when they are struggling, and often those students are students that maybe haven't been academically as successful, and therefore they may need more supports, and you're just getting to know them in the middle of the year as opposed to the beginning of the year when you're getting oriented to everybody.
So in effect, we could be doing them a disservice when we bring them in more often a year.
I think so.
Yeah.
Am I correct from what I just heard you say that it's only the time of the year that you can discriminate or set a standard? You have to be here in September, or you can't, as opposed to this I was talking about, well, how many credits they burn and that kind of stuff. Is that really not on the table?
I would imagine that we can say, as Katie suggested, like, if you bring in this many credits, then you will be considered a sophomore. I think we can probably do that. I don't know that we can say, and so, I don't know, if we could say, unless you have this many credits. Well, so for instance, we had a young man who came to enroll here who was 20, and he had 3 credits. In New York State, you need to have 22 credits by the time you're 21 in order to get a diploma, because once you're 21, you're no longer eligible to attend a public high school. So, to admit somebody into a high school at the age of 20, when they clearly couldn't get credits in time,
Right.
doesn't make a lot of sense. Yes, he's eligible to attend high school, but could we say in an admissions policy that, we're only admitting students who actually can realistically could complete a high school diploma? And again, I'm really sorry that I didn't hear back from the attorney, to get some of his perspective on this, and I will definitely be
So
going.
that'll have to be our next one.
That's right.
One more question, back to the 9th and 10th graders. What does this language mean? With the timing of their start date at the discretion of the principal / superintendent.
So what that would mean is that, for students in grades 9 and 10, if if they'd like to come in after the start of the school year, they could be admitted, but they wouldn't necessarily be admitted, 2 days after they enrolled. They may be told, you can start at the end of this quarter, or you need to wait till the end of the semester, so that there's some, it's not sort of rolling in when you apply, but rather, once you have all your new paperwork submitted, then we'll take a look at where you're at and make a decision about when the best timing for you to come in would be during the school year. So, with mostly the, and also it really depends on the timing in a quarter, like if it's 2 weeks into the school year, maybe depending on the student, maybe just fine for a student to just, jump right in if we assess their readiness, and they seem like they'll take to it just fine, and that would be okay. But for some students, starting at a quarter break would probably make more sense.
Okay.
Might also depend on the capacity of that particular teaching team to manage the transition at that point versus another, but just, yeah,
Okay.
that's about it.
I'll have some examples, thank you.
I mean, do we have any sense what the admission policy are like at some of the other charter schools that we think of as being as schools we'd like to emulate?
Well, in charter schools that are in large urban areas where there are many charter schools, it's a completely different culture, because people, or even there are like public high schools where people can apply to enroll in different public high schools, because in most of those cases, a charter school will certainly by April 1st, or even much earlier, some of them it's pushed it back to like February 1st, they've collected more than enough enrollment forms to be ready to hold their lottery on, I don't think you can do it any earlier than April 1st, right? So, as part of your lottery, you also then have your waiting list, right? So, for the most part, this is really more about our particular conditions here in Ithaca. Smaller population, and not, we find that a lot of people are seeking to enroll like mid to late spring, and then over the summer months, we don't have that sort of, culture that they have in the city, or, just the timeline.
Yeah, I guess I was more focused on once the school year starts, not about the lead up to the school.
Yeah, well, that's it.
I can understand how that would be different,
Mhm.
and actually was aware of how that is different.
Right.
What I'm not clear about is once the school year is started, what then?
Right,
mean,
how do they pull people off the
Because
waiting list?
maybe I'm the only one who's just figuring out the words to put around this, but I think that the issues we've had are with students who basically just show up in the middle of the semester, in the middle of a quarter. And we've been saying, sure, come on board, and, in part because somebody else is saying, maybe this is something you should be doing. And we just need to stop that,
Right, I think that's right.
period.
I do too.
I mean, I just want to sort of cut to the chase here.
Yeah, I don't think we help them when we do that. I don't think we help anybody. Let me start. I have to go. I have another thing to be at.
Okay.
Sorry.
Alrighty,
Yeah, thank you.
thanks, Ranger.
Thanks, Randy.
So I'm sure we will bring this up again. This gets the conversation started.
Yep, and I'll follow up on the research to bring back to the next meeting.
We'll think more about this, and continue. Okay, the next, item is 2C. Tina, I don't understand quite what's the difference between 2C and 3A.
Okay.
But can you just introduce both of these two things at the same time and tell us what's going on?
Sure. So this is, a recommended upgrade to, an articulation of policies regarding conducting criminal background checks. That's 2C. So this is a new policy in that although we've been essentially following this process, we haven't had a board-approved policy related to this process before. So this summarizes the process that we do for conditional clearance. So all employees within 5 days of being hired, they get their fingerprints taken, right? We send those fingerprints off to the state to be clear. I mean, they get the fingerprints taken at the police station. But then we have to wait to hear back from the state. So while we're waiting, we have a mechanism for having a conditional clearance with closer supervision of those employees in the meantime, which is detailed here. And, so as long as we're monitoring them and tracking when the fingerprint clearance comes in, then we can have those employees in our building and working with our students. And exhibit B here, or 3A, is the resolution that authorizes me as the principal and superintendent to appoint an employee on an emergency conditional basis. So this is something, and the reason this one's under old business is because you've actually done this before. This is several years ago. I think this was during the first year. And the issue here is that because you're not meeting, we're meeting, now every other month, sometimes monthly. We may need to hire somebody between meetings, and we may need to hire them because we need to get them on the job. And so to wait to bring that to the board may not serve the school. So this was a delegated authority for me, but now there's some new language that's being recommended by the Charter Schools Institute. So that's the resolution. That gives the new language, gets the upgrade there. And then this is the policy for conducting criminal background checks, which includes a supervision policy that details how those employees who haven't received fingerprint clearance back from are being supervised.
Okay, so for the policy for conducting criminal background checks, that's the first order of business. Does anybody have any questions specifically about that for Tina?
What does SED stand for?
State education.
As opposed to NICET.
That's right.
The way I remember talking about it. It said NICET.
That's right.
Yeah.
No set.
No said.
So Tina, has this been reviewed by the attorney and all that kind of business?
Yes, and this is very boilerplate from the Charter Schools Institute too, so this is not, we didn't make this up. And the box at the end, it just we've documented the fact that Sabrina, Katie, and I both reviewed this and to make sure everything's in order in terms of the process and the.
So is this something now that charter schools that are coming online now have upfront? In other words, why, I'm wondering why we didn't have this in the original package that we sent off to the
Yeah,
state.
this is something that's come to us recently. But
I
the
mean, I
process.
can imagine the Charter School Institute going, we need to do this in every one of our schools
Right,
that we charter.
yeah, that's
So we
basically
have to
it.
go out and make sure that this gets done.
So when they came and conducted their review, they checked all of this and saw that we were doing this process. Which is executed with Sabrina-like accuracy. Sabrina does it. So they saw that they checked everything, they checked to make sure that we have our conditional, the paperwork documenting any conditional employments, which are often like new substitute teachers, for instance, that, substitute teachers, can come and go, and, so we're trying to hire substitute teachers in a steady stream, and we may need to hire one and put them right to work, within a week's time, and we don't have a fingerprint.
So we had the process in place, but not the policy.
Correct, that's right, so the policy's catching up to the process.
Any other questions for Tina? Okay, so I move that we adopt this policy. Second. Any further discussion on this? Joe, I see you're reading over there.
Yeah, I have to apologize. I am now seeing this for the first time, maybe because I was traveling today, or maybe because I didn't look at my email late last night, but I'm going to abstain because I haven't had a chance to think this through.
Okay, that's fine.
We can also table it till, I don't think it's like, it's not
We
really
do, we
critical.
need to have 5, so, if Joe abstains, we could still take the vote, so the question then is, are you guys more comfortable waiting? Tina, is this a
Call
rush?
for the vote, there is no rush.
Sorry, Roger, which
I
is,
said call for the vote.
You are calling for the vote.
Calling for the vote.
okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstain? And it passes. Okay. So then the next one, which Tina already introduced, was 3A. So this is now the resolution, you can read it at the top there, regarding emergency conditional clearance. So the first one was criminal background checks, emergency conditional clearance. So I'll give everybody a chance to look at that one.
Now, how does this dovetail with what was just passed? Or does it?
It does, so as part of this, process of bringing in new employees, this is the, when we have an employee that we'd like to see start work prior to our receiving back the clearance on the fingerprints, you would be redelegating actually authority to me to, put that employee to work with an emergency conditional clearance. And so there's a form that we keep on file and that we revisit every 20 days while, providing some additional supervision and guidance for those employees in the meantime. So, and in terms of reporting on any, like for instance, we have a young woman who is a master's level student in the social work program who is on site and working with students, and I did an emergency conditional clearance for her while we waited for her fingerprint information to come back. Because the board had already delegated that authority to me previously, that's why I was able to do that. Now we're just upgrading the language that the authorizer
This
is
is why.
using in a standard way across.
That's good for all of us.
Stay focused.
Okay, so, there's a motion to, adopt this, giving Tina the ability to, appoint on an emergency basis. Do I hear a second? I make this motion.
Second.
Seconded by Roger. Other discussion?
Just to be clear, so when we were meeting monthly, we didn't need this, as opposed to being every other month.
Even monthly would be a stretch. Like for some, again, like this usually applies to things like substitute teachers. So,
Sure.
you know, if we have somebody who's applied to be a sub and a certified teacher, we may wanna put them right to work the next time a teacher is out, as opposed to, you know, waiting a month before we, you know, if the last board meeting had just happened, do you know what I mean? So this is something that, we have.
So what was happening when we were meeting?
Same thing. It was just-
So
Tina,
that
what
may
he-
take us some language.
What he's asking is why, what's different between this and what we have here?
These bullets are more explicit. Like, it breaks down the board chair's